Welcome back to part 2. Let's rejoin Dr. Timms when he's talking about how do you manage your tank post-cycle, 6 months, 18 months, 4 years. So okay, you've cycled your tank, you've put your fish in, and a lot of people I speak to think, okay, that's it. The lights start getting turned up, which then obviously starts to breed your algae and other stuff. So when you kind of get through that, I suppose 4-6 weeks, should we call it? You put your fish in, or some people may do a fish cycle in terms of what they do. When I look at that kind of journey you then take from, say, call it week 6, and you're going through 6 months to 12 months, and people say it's a really hard stage. I find your tanks you haven't got the stability. And that's got to be related, I think, to bacteria. I'm just kind of guessing because you just don't have that sweet spot. How do you evolve your tank to, I suppose, to reduce the uglies, to try and reduce the dinos, the cyno, all those kind of things? Because they're the things I think that really agitate people. And I think probably why people leave the hobby quite early, because they expect a dream tank they see on Instagram and they see a mess.
Right. And the reason is because of nutrient control. And this is what happens until the system gets dialed in, which takes really a good solid year, is that people are reading the internet and thinking, I don't want any phosphate and I don't want any nitrate. They're trying to keep phosphates and nitrates at super low levels. And yet they have these beautiful, intense lights, which are putting lots of energy into the system. And you can't mess with Mother Nature. And your aquarium is a piece of Mother Nature. And dinoflagellates, dinos grow not in 100%. This isn't 100%, but it's 90% case. When you have low or no phosphate and low nitrate, you're going to grow dinoflagellates. And why is that? One, they're photosynthetic. You're putting a lot of light up there. And 2 is they can get the nutrients they need heterotrophically, meaning they can actually feed on organic material. Because you're thinking, well, how can they do this? It's perfect. I've got no ammonia. I've got no nitrate. I've got no phosphate. What you do in that scenario, you've got to think team bacteria, team cyno, and team dino. You know what team you want to be on. But by keeping no phosphate, when you have no phosphate and no nitrate, team bacteria can't get in the field. They can't grow. They have to have some phosphate and nitrate in the water. And I do probably 16 consumer shows a year between Aquashella, Reefapalooza, Frags Fest, and things like that. And I'm telling you, 95% of the time, person comes up to me and says, I'm having a heck of a dino I say, your phosphates and nitrates are 0. And they're going, yep. You have forced the system into dino heaven. You've got to get a little phosphate and nitrate into that. So it's all about nutrient control in those first, 6, 7, 8 months by, are you feeding too much? Some people they're adding food, they're adding fuel, they're just adding all this stuff, and the system isn't stable because you're adding too many variables to it while trying to keep 0 phosphates and nitrates. Just low levels is what you need to do, and build up the population of not only bacteria, but all these other types of microorganisms that grow on the live rock. And it is more difficult when you start with dead rock because it takes time.
Yeah. So
that's why it takes
about
6 or 8 months.
Yeah. And I see things like using copepods. I've started using things like the Miracle Mud because of the nutrients in there. And you've got to kind of watch around your nutrients going up, and adding different like phyto and just adding different kind of life sources into the tank. And I find that has started to work in that first 6 to 12 months because it helps to populate and it helps to feed different life forms into the tank. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I don't know about too much of the ZOA, but definitely the Fido and the Miracle Mud type products, because you're adding a bigger base of the microorganisms that are at that bottom of the food pyramid. You know, everybody, you see that, or the ecosystem. You've got the primary producers in there, and so you need some of those encrusting organisms. Corals can do a good job because why? They have photosynthetic organisms inside them that can consume the nutrients. It's all about who's going to get the nutrients. And if you have too low nutrients, like why do you grow cyanobacteria, again, photosynthetic, and they love it when there's no nitrate in the water because they can fix nitrogen from the air. And the air is 78% nitrogen. Yeah. See, a lot of people don't realize that, and they'll have super low nitrate or no nitrate and a little bit of phosphate. But the cyanobacteria, that carpet, they can extract the phosphate they need from the organics. They can get the nitrogen from the atmosphere or the dissolved air in your aquarium. And so you can't even measure that because that's inorganic nitrogen, not organic nitrogen. Ammonia, nitrite, or I got that wrong. Inorganic nitrogen is ammonia, nitrite, and nitrate, but it's the nitrogen that's dissolved in your air. So again, now you were talking about levels. I like the phosphate between 0.03, 0.05, and nitrate between 7 and 10. That's what I have found is the sweet spot where you've got enough to grow the bacteria, but not enough to have things out of control. But there's one other factor that is everybody wants gin clear water. As they want their water as clear as your room, my office here, and that's not the ocean. And so what's happening is because of that pursuit, we have skimmers, UV, ozone, roller filters, micro socks, all those devices. The unintentional consequence is to remove all the bacteria from your water. So you go, okay, Dr. Tim, I got my phosphate and my nitrate dialed in, and my tank still looks terrible because you've got all this stuff on there is preventing the growth of bacteria in the water column, but you still have nutrients, or even if you don't, what's going to grow? Stuff on surfaces. The beard algae, the hair algae, the cyano and the dino, because none of those things affect the surfaces inside your aquarium. And so my number one cure for that is put your skimmer on a timer, which people are like, oh God, I can't do that. Yes, you can. You don't need to run your skimmer 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's a simple fix. Put it on a timer and your tank will look so much better after 3 or 4 weeks. I didn't say get rid of it, but control it.
So you basically, a lot of people I know who don't run it 24/7 will run it at night because the skimmer helps the pH and it helps to buffer that up with the bubbles and everything else. So I get what you're saying on that, because I run roller filters. I just put one on a different tank that I've got, and the clarity of the water is much better than it was. Yeah, a lot of people now, there seems to be not a fad, but people talking about coral snow, because in the ocean you'll see all the particulates and everything else, and the corals are feeding off of that. But I suppose if you're using roller filters and everything like that, you're taking all that stuff out of the water and you're leaving it. It's not taking the cyano out, is it? It's not taking the dinos out, because that's attached to the surface areas, unless of course you've got a dinos that floats around at night, in which case the UV. But all those kind of things are indiscriminate, aren't they? The UV will take out the good and the bad. It doesn't say I'll put that one back. It will filter all of it out. So roller filters are good to a point, but you'll end up over filtering your water, which is your point, and then you end up putting bacteria in when you might not have needed to because it was there already. I think is what you're saying.
Right. I'm not saying any of these are bad. It's just that we combine them all and then we run them full tilt. Or if you're, 100-liter aquarium, you'll get a protein skimmer for a 500-liter aquarium. and it's overkill. The water is too clean. And I see this all the time where people will say, my corals just, they don't look good. My colors aren't bright. They just are blah brown. What do corals do 24 hours a day? They filter seawater. That's where they get their food. Copepods are fine, but copepods are kind of like, French fries, cookies, biscuits. They're not
Little
the
snack.
primary food. They are. The primary food for bacteria is what you mentioned, the marine snow. What's on the marine snow? Marine snow is an small organic particle that's covered with bacteria. If you've kept, reptiles, you know about gut loading crickets, because the cricket's just the shell. You put the nutrition inside the cricket, the reptile eats the cricket, getting the nutrition. Same thing with bacteria. And I have a formula, and I give this away for people. You gut load the bacteria, turn off your skin and all these devices, let the corals filter feed just for a few hours each night where they want to feed. And within a couple of weeks, your corals, the colors will change. Take a before and after picture and you'll be amazed by just turning off all this equipment. I'm not saying get rid of it, just use it in a little smarter sense, and you won't even see. It's not like your water's going to be super cloudy or anything like that, but your corals will respond and your tank will look better. It'll be much cleaner, and you're going to fight off the dinos and the cynos because you're taking those nutrients, converting them into bacteria. Your corals are consuming the bacteria, therefore consuming the nutrients. It's the proverbial win-win-win.
Yeah, and of course we manage our tanks through nitrate and phosphate. So your point, you may say, well, they're in balance. My alkalinity and all those are where they should be, but it's the stuff that we can't measure, which is the bacteria. Because what we're saying is those all things are on point, but because they haven't got the microcrustaceans and other things you're referring to, you're kind of starving your corals, aren't you?
You are.
A point.
And what,
Yeah.
yeah, a point. And what happens to that, next phase as 6 months, 8 months come on, is your tank starts to naturally, slowly grow a base of primary producers. And then one day it all snaps in. But it takes a good year with all the stuff we have, and the tank almost runs itself because it has that base that is controlling the nutrients until you do something crazy and add a bunch of fish and things like that. But you got to resist that urge sometimes.
Yeah,
But
I
it
got to
takes a
say, when
little
you
bit of
start
time for
putting
it to dial in.
Yeah, it's like anything. If you put a lot of corals in at one go, or you put a lot of fish in, you're upsetting the whole ecosystem, aren't you? And I find that I had a 5-foot
Yes.
tank here once, and I took 2 tangs out. It was just too big, and the nutrients went through the floor. Because I mean, tangs are probably one of the messiest fish that you can think of. And likewise, when I started closing the tank, when I took out some of the big colonies in SPS, the nitrates went through the roof. And you don't think of it, but to your point, they consume all of that then doesn't break down, because that's what they take as food, isn't it? And yes, that
The
makes
nutrient,
perfect
the
sense.
symbiotic.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's why you have to start thinking about it's just not the coral, but it's what's inside the coral. It's what the tangs are doing and how the whole community, and that's really what it is. And our equipment is just eliminating. We're artificially pushing the system towards cyno or dino unintentionally, because people don't have the information, which is why I like to come on and talk, to all sorts of people about this, because it's just smarter. If you understand how the system's working, then you can dial in your own tank based on how much you're feeding, what corals, what fish you have, and things like that.
And I suppose also in the first 12 months, compared to a tank that's say 4 years, in that first 12 months, you are putting more corals in, you are putting more fish in. So you're changing the equilibrium of the tank anyway. But when it gets to year 4, you probably, you've put most of your corals in. Your fish might be fully stocked. So yes, they'll be growing, but that's an inch at a time, isn't it? And a bit at a time. So the tank can evolve as the coral grows. It's on a small part each day. So when in 12 months, you think, wow, it's grown by that much. it hasn't opened overnight. But if you're all of a sudden putting fish and corals in, that does happen overnight. So it's a fair point. Your tank's unstable, plus you're putting fish in, plus you're putting corals. It doesn't know which way is up, does it? So therefore, it's a mess. You're creating that instability in something that's unstable anyway in that first 12 months.
Right. Or people will say, well, the tank goes 4 years old and all of a sudden it crashes and it looks terrible. Well, are you maintaining the substrate? Because there's the ticking time bomb is, and I don't know in the UK, for a while here in the US, having a plenum was very popular, where you had this space in the bottom of the tank and then a screen cloth and then substrate on top. So you had this, what are called a plenum down below.
It's not something that I've come across. I don't know if that is something that's, I suppose, back in the day or whether that's quite recent. I think people keep a lot thinner substrate than they used to, because it was quite common for people to have 3 or 4 inches. I know people have that kind of thing in their sump and everything else as a kind of almost like a litter tray to pull everything in. But I think nowadays I've seen people don't have more than kind of 2 inches in terms of sand. Some do, but in the main, it's more there for decorative purposes, and kind of say an inch or a couple of centimeters.
That's good. Yeah. That deeper bed, when it gets to 3, 4, 5 inches, the plenum, over time, that's going to become anaerobic and then anoxic. And that's when your tank suffers, because you stir things up or something happens and you release the gases that build up and it kills everything. So I'm very much a very shallow substrate. There's plenty of room for the microorganisms to grow. They don't need 4 inches at all.
Cool. So you get your tank to get through all those stages. You get the 12, 18 months. It starts growing out. It starts looking good. It feels more stable than it was. On that kind of 12, 18 months, how do you then sustain that? And then kind of sand aside, because I get the fact, deep sand beds, people start stirring it up. It starts releasing things. What else would you do? Just, I suppose, maintain. You're trying to maintain it, aren't you? And trying to keep it on a level where you got a stability, it's healthy, and it's thriving. I always think a sweet spot, 3 years, tanks look good at 3 years. I don't know why. Probably may not be factually correct, but that's how it feels in my mind.
No, you're pretty correct. And the main thing is, what I say is, don't futz with it. Just step back, keep the food nutrients, the inputs low. Look at your lighting system, because depending on the lights you're running, they can switch. But we're getting better LEDs, but some lights, the wavelengths switch because they get old. And sometimes aquarists get a little lazy. I've had it for 3 years. I know what I'm doing. I can skip this month's maintenance. And see, when it's just like with your car. I'm not going to take it to the mechanic and do the oil change. I'll wait. And then all of a sudden things crack because it was working great. Now what's wrong? Well, you didn't maintain it for 6 months or 7 months. So you kind of get maybe a little lazy. And so don't do that. Is measure your alkalinity, make sure that's in check. Now you've got to look at your alkalinity, your calcium, your magnesium. If you've got a ton of corals growing, well, is that taking the micronutrients out of your system? And a lot of people then want to go and to ICP testing. That can be an issue, because ICP testing cannot actually measure at the low levels that are natural seawater. It's kind of a little pet peeve of mine, but the ICP tests don't measure in all the parameters in these super low levels. So you have to be careful about relying on that, and you need to maintain over time. Nutrients are being micronutrients, and we talk not calcium, not magnesium, not strontium. Those are macro.
You talk about things like manganese and those kind of boron and those kind of the minor ones that help with coloration, and people sell I suppose the dosing of the minor elements. I suppose they're called.
The minor elements. Minor, because a lot of those are taken out by corals. fish only tanks over time, organics build up. But with corals, I think, I don't have a ton of real evidence on this, but I've been doing this many times, is that you have a micronutrient deficit with coral tanks. That's what
Absolutely.
you
I
have to
think
be
there was
careful with.
someone I know quite well who keeps Goniopora, and we was at a talk, and she was talking about manganese. That if you keep your manganese, it's a whilst it's a minor element for Goniopora, it's, you know, if you want your Goniopora to suffer, lack of manganese will help it on its way, because they rely on manganese. And I've got to say, since I've been dosing manganese, the question is, how do you measure it? Because you can't do that very well in a test kit. Quite often
No,
an
no.
ICP doesn't show up. If you get a measurement, then I say thumbs up on that. So I'm in a routine, and they're dosing a certain amount on that. Just as like with
Yeah.
torch corals, I've got a big colony, manganese, and I find also keeping high magnesium, and the magnesium drifts more, because I find that torches seem to consume a lot of. Again, I can't prove it, only from in my own tank, but certainly the people I know, manganese helps your Goniopora. And there may be other corals where there may be another minor one that helps. So I think is your point, isn't it? That it's just the intricacies of that they will also suck a lot of those minors out.
Right. And there's an area that people that have they've kept, we know this, but there hasn't been that research to say, these corals you need this level, or this you need this, and we
Yeah.
tend to think, okay, we're for everybody we keep that, and that's not how it is. The ocean and corals are very varied, and so we give the best advice, but you have to realize in 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years that advice may change as we learn more, as the techniques get better, as people get interested in this this chemistry biology connection, which is the holistic approach. That's what aquarium is. It's a holistic approach rather than just concentrating on ammonia or nitrite, or just nitrifier, just that. You've got to look at it, step back and look at the whole system. And
It's a bit of
that's what
it's a
happens in
juggling
3 or
act.
4 years. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is a juggling act. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. So I
but
think
that's the
when
fun
I
and the
use it,
challenge, right?
it is, and things change. I must admit, if I think go back 4 years ago, there was a lot of people running ultra low nutrients, weren't they? Keep your nitrates as
Yeah.
low as possible, keep your phosphorus, and then it almost flipped, not overnight, but very quickly. A lot of people saying about, well, no, it's not about ultra low. It's about having a reasonable level of both of those, depending on the corals that you keep, and having that balance, because you're starving your corals. And that happened fairly quickly in terms of how that
Well,
turnaround came about.
yeah. Well, because people could see it. I think some of the people that push this stuff, my question was, have you ever actually kept corals? Because, but your corals, when you can see them quickly, it's not something that takes 6 or 9 months. Within a short period of time, people can see my corals do not look good. Something wrong here. So,
Yeah,
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 yeah.
absolutely.
So it's very visual. Yeah.
Yeah, and then people do say, what do your corals look like? And that's why things like Duncans are
Yeah.
fantastic, because Duncans, if they shrink out, you think that's the canary. I always think the Duncan is your
Yeah.
canary. Yeah, a
Yep.
lot of people say that. It's not just me. And then there may be other corals that other people say, yeah, I know. If that's looking a bit off piste, then there's something to just keep an eye on things. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's
And
true.
to bring it back a little bit, because people measure ammonia all the time, but to me, you should measure nitrite, which is a very easy test. If it turns pink, there's something wrong, because there should never really be any nitrite in your water. And if you start seeing nitrite, that's the canary that's saying there's something wrong. Yeah, and that's the indicator that's telling you something's bad is going to happen. Something's wrong, that something's stuck, the water's not flowing. Because as I talked about earlier, nitrification is ammonia, nitrite, nitrate. But
Yeah.
when you have a buildup of organics, or you're starting to form hydrogen sulfide by going anaerobic to anoxic, it reverses, and the nitrate is converted to nitrite.
Wow.
And then, yeah, it goes backwards. And so if you have nitrite and your system is functioning, well, when I got nitrification, that's working. Okay, I have an anaerobic zone. I have an anoxic zone that's built up because I haven't been doing this. We use this a lot. I mean, I do consulting with big systems and commercial systems and things like that. And nitrite is the one indicator. You should never have it. If you have it, there's something happening in your tank.
I don't know of anyone that I've spoken to, and I do live streams every Friday with some other guys, where we've ever talked about the fact of, even if it's periodically, I don't mean every week, how often people
just
test the nitrite when you cycle. As soon as it's cycle and you get through it, I mean, I have a kit that's a nitrite because I don't want to waste one of the kits. So you do one as a joint. So that's a really fair point, because that makes perfect sense. But I never really heard that before, or anyone talk about it. So thank you. It's a great tip.
Yeah, you're welcome. I used to run a big, closed system fish hatchery because I was the hatchery manager raising the hybrid striped bass fry, and it's a closed system. And you're feeding a lot, of this protein-rich food. And then the nitrite, it's like I say, it's simple. The test kits kind of last forever, and just a little bit that turns pink. Easy test, and it's cheap, and that's the one that's telling you there's something going south. What we say going south, or going, something's going wrong in the wrong direction here.
But you got a potential issue that you can't see today, but tomorrow. Yeah, absolutely. And once a month, I mean, you're testing every week. Just to throw that in once a month, in the scheme of things, that's no big deal, is it?
Brilliant. Yeah, exactly. But it's definitely the one that will tell you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Right, we've come towards the end. Any other tidbits that you've got for the people that are watching from what we've covered? Or if you want to cover any of the products that Dr. Tim's, because we talk very much about the science and how you do stuff, should we say, from cycle to 6 months to 18 months. And I know there's a number of products that you can use from the start in the tank right through the lifespan of a tank.
Yeah, well, we're most well known for our nitrifiers, but I really like our waste away gel, because it's the waste away bacteria in a gel form that time releases 24/7. So people that will refuse to turn their skimmer off or things like that, it's basically bacteria dosing, a little bit of bacteria to keep care of the nutrients. Because if you just pour a bunch of bacteria in, that can be a problem. So this is a time release thing. We're the only ones that have that, developed that. It's become very, very popular. Helps immensely. And then patience is really the key. And as with anything, when something goes wrong, the initial reaction is, I got to do something. What I say is, step back. The calmness, panic never helped anything. Step back. Do I have water flow? Is my water flowing? Just that type of thing. Do I have oxygen in the system? Is there a blockage? Trying to go down a mental checklist. Like I have 3 koi ponds in my backyard.
Wow.
And I have a 5,000 gallon one, and the water level kept on going down, and we use liners out here in Southern California because of the earthquake situation. You can't use, it's got to be flexible. Okay.
Makes sense.
And I'm thinking, the liner's got a hole in it. I gotta find the hole. And then I just thought, it's going down too fast. I don't see puddles. It can't be. And what happened, and I thought about it, is for a couple of days, searched, is that this one root had grown so much that it had dislodged and loosened a pipe. And it's like, how could that happen? But it did. And there was a leak out of pipe connection. So that was a whole lot simpler to fix than jumping all into the pond or draining the pond and trying to find a
and you wouldn't have found anything.
Terror.
Wow. Yeah.
No, I wouldn't have found anything. So it's just, try to step back and analyze the situation, not in a panic mode.
Yeah.
Because it only happens at night. You come home on a Friday or a Saturday after you've been to the pub or something, and it's like, that tank isn't looking right. Oh, I'm going to panic. That's just the wrong thing to do.
Absolutely. I find that
only because I've been there, done that.
Well, yeah, people lose a fish or a coral dies. Just don't do anything. Just watch the tank, because corals die and fish die. Not to say you
Yeah.
haven't done anything wrong, but then people
Right.
start changing things, and all of a sudden other things die, because what you've done, you've just changed the whole equilibrium of the tank, because you've changed loads of stuff and you've upset everything, and it might have just been that time.
Everything.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Well, that's
Yeah.
great advice. It's been a pleasure listening to you, and I've learned tons here. And hopefully, the people that are watching, I'm sure that if you like the video, then please leave a comment below. If I can't answer, then I will message Dr. Tim and ask him what the answer to the question is, and we'll come back to you. So please, don't be shy in asking questions. And thank you very much. It's been an honor to meet you, and also to listen to you and your work. Really enjoyed your products and listening to you. So thank you very much. And everyone, thank you. Enjoy the day.